Who was the original and first Jethro Tull?
My original, your original. Well, I take no notice of him at all. I didn't do very much history at school. But it transpires, in case you're interested, that the original Jethro Tull was a 19th century English agriculturalist who invented a seed drill. You see, the first automatic process whereby small holes were made in Mother Earth and even smaller seeds were deposited one at a time and neatly covered over, as a cat does after having been naughty.
And to get together Jethro Tull as it is now, what sort of process went into that?
Well, it involved the long move down to London, which was a bit nerve-wracking because none of us had really lived away from home or had to actually support ourselves full-time as musicians. And when we did go professional, in that sense, it was, total commitment. And all that any of us wanted to do was simply make a living of a very reasonable sort. But that proved impossible. The group actually split up a week after it left its native Blackpool and went to London. And I was the only one who stayed down there. I think I had a potato more than everybody else or something. Or was it some biscuits I had? I know I had some means of survival anyway, over and above the others. I had come better prepared. And it was in my knotted handkerchief, you see, on the stick. And so I stayed down and met up with 3 other guys, and we decided to form a new group, which eventually became Jethro Tull, after a couple of months of starving and playing about 3 gigs, and me having to take a part-time job working in Luton Ritz Cinema, vacuum cleaning the floor.
Welcome back, everybody, and the first of our delights for you tonight is the fantastic
Jethro Tull.
My father, who didn't talk a lot, and I never actually caught him listening to music, but he did have a gramophone, a 78 RPM thing with these needles, brass needles, and he had a few, not a vast collection, but a small collection of big band wartime jazz. So it was all the, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, blah, 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 all that era of music, which was something that I was allowed very carefully to play on his 78 RPM records. And I didn't know what I liked about it, because the only music I'd heard prior to that was really church music and maybe a little Scottish folk music, since I grew up in Scotland at that time. But it was some unidentifiable thing that drew me into this music. I later found out that it was syncopation, and it was very often the blues scale. Yeah. And that I then heard again at the age of 9, I think, when I heard Elvis Presley's earliest couple of singles. And that struck a chord. And then by the time I was 15, I think, and I heard Muddy Waters and a few other guys who were making their way to Europe at that time. They were being feted in European concert halls. They were happy as Larry. But it was that they experienced going to an audience who sat there in rapture listening to them. They came straight from a club on the south side of Chicago straight into the Vienna concert hall. And what a culture shift that was. But it was the opportunity for people like me and my era, my peers in the world of early music in British terms, to actually see these people play live. And we might have known their records a little bit, but suddenly there they were on the stage, and Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and all the guys you ever heard of from the British music scene probably went to see these guys either playing at Croydon Fairfield Hall or in the Manchester Free Trade Hall or wherever it might have been. I think we all managed to catch a glimpse of this for real, which of course then developed into the British blues boom that was from, I guess, 65 through early 70s.
In the quaint seaside northern town of Blackpool, we were a little band who started out playing essentially blues covers of, unusually for Blackpool, because everybody did kind of top 20 cover jobs, but we were doing stuff by Muddy Waters and Sonny Boy Williamson and Howlin' Wolf, and we were kind of odd for a little northern seaside town. Wasn't exactly the most commercial thing to be doing. But we heard of a band who did top 20 covers. They were called The Executives, and they worked a lot. They had a lot of gigs because they did the kind of stuff people wanted to hear. Played the working men's clubs and functions where people drank a lot and sang along to cheerful top 20 ditties. And the bass player in that band was a guy called Glenn Cornick, and we knew these guys were pretty good musicians, even though we didn't really like their music terribly. But it came to a moment where we were looking for a new bass player, and surprisingly to us, Glenn said, "Yeah, I'll come and play with you guys." And so it was quite a step down for him, from earning pretty decent money as working with a day job, but playing probably 4 or 5 nights a week regularly, to joining a band who maybe only had 1 or 2 shows a week if we were lucky. So we were quite honoured that Glenn chose to join us, and I think found the music a bit more honest, perhaps more with integrity, and because we ventured into kind of more jazzy blues as well. So Glenn became the bass player, only to find a few months later that the band essentially broke up because we went to the south of England in an attempt to be successful in the London area. But most of the band gave up after a week of homelessness and hunger and went back to Blackpool. And Glenn and I were the two who stayed. And we found another guitar player, Mick Abrahams, who joined the band with his friend Clive Bunker. So the original band that became Jethro Tull was Glenn and myself and Clive and Mick. So Glenn and I shared a very, very frighteningly horrible cold water bedsit. I mean, you can't call it an apartment. It was a shoe cupboard, for a few weeks until he was lucky enough to take up residence somewhat further away with his mother and stepfather. So he had a warm bed, a roof over his head, and 3 meals a day, while I continued to be virtually homeless and certainly very, very hungry for about 4 months until the gigs started to come in and Jethro Tull became Jethro Tull, and we found ourselves on the road to somewhere.
Magic finger. Here we go. A 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. My Sunday feeling is coming on over me. My Sunday feeling is coming on over me. Now that the night is over, gotta clear my head so I can see. Till I get it put together, that old feeling can't let it be. Don't nobody ask me where I leave my head last night. Don't nobody ask me where I leave my head last night. I really don't remember. But with one more cigarette, I think I might. Till I get it put together, that old feeling can't get it right.
At what point did you decide that you were going to take up the flute, and why?
It was when I got a copy of a John Mayall album featuring Eric Clapton, and like many people of my age, was immediately struck by the instrumental prowess of the young Eric Clapton, featured reading the Beano, famously on the John Mayall album cover. And you just knew this guy was way ahead of everybody else, me included. And also we were hearing rumours, because I was still living up north at the time, hearing rumours of these other gunslinger guitar people like Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Ritchie Blackmore's name came up. So, I kind of knew, even though I hadn't heard these people, that these were the hotshot young guitar players. And clearly, I was fumbling around with these people. I would improvise and play bluesy guitar solos and things, but it was fairly simple stuff. And so the idea of finding another instrument was in my head. And the only thing I could play was a little bit of harmonica and a tin whistle. And when Mick Abrahams joined the band that was within a few weeks to become Jethro Tull, he clearly was a guitar player that was well-rounded and formed in terms of blues and rock and roll. And I decided I would cease to play guitar. I didn't want to be playing rhythm guitar behind Mick. I thought better to have another instrument that can, be in the front line of things. So,
Was it literally that random?
it was random in the sense that it was something that when I decided to part company with a rather battered Fender Stratocaster, whose previous owner was Lemmy Kilminster, it went back and I swapped whatever credit I had for something else, whatever it might be. And the shiny flute was hanging on the wall of the music store, and there was a Shure Unidyne 3 microphone. And I said, okay, I've got about £60 of credit, I'll have those two, and here's the guitar back. Of course, the guitar, being a early 60s Fender Strat, with some provenance in terms of its previous owners, probably worth 30 grand today, but 30 grand for a £30 flute, well, it turned out to be a pretty fair exchange.
Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new album deep dive series. Now this series was inspired by my good friend Steve over at All the World's a Stage, who just recently gifted me this deluxe box set of Jethro Tull's first studio album. This was released on October 25th, 1968. And I'll be fair, I had a couple of Jethro Tull albums in my collection, but I really didn't know all that much about Jethro Tull. I knew Aqualung and Thick as a Brick and Songs from the Wood, etc., but I didn't know all that much about the history itself of the band. So I'm kind of learning as I go along. Some of you may already have this knowledge, but for me, it's kind of a new experience dipping my toe into Jethro Tull. At this stage in the band's history, they were very much influenced by their two principal songwriters, Ian Anderson, who was the singer and flute player, and guitarist Mick Abrahams. And Mick Abrahams very much was a bluesy, jazzy guitarist, and so you hear a lot of that on here. Songs and a musical style that is not altogether that different from what bands like Fleetwood Mac and Cream and the Jimi Hendrix Experience were putting out around this time. Very much that British blues influence. Back in 1964 and 1965, you had a lot of UK bands that had a hard-on for the blues, Animals, the Yardbirds, etc. And so Mick Abraham's vision for the band was that they were going to carry on that tradition, whereas Ian Anderson, he wanted to do more progressive kinds of music and steer them into a completely different direction. So you kind of have that hybrid here, a little bit of the progressive, more acoustic, folky music, and the more bluesy, jazz-oriented rock and roll that Mick Abrahams liked to play. Mick Abrahams would leave after this album, so Ian Anderson would eventually get his wish and would come to record with Jethro Tull some of the greatest progressive rock albums of all time. One thing that I never knew is, how did Jethro Tull get their name? Well, it actually was coined by their booking agent, who happened to be a history enthusiast. He named them after Jethro Tull, who was an 18th century agriculturalist. As a matter of fact, the band didn't even realize that was what their name was going to be until they showed up at a gig at the Marquee Club and realized, oh, that's, I guess, what we're going to be called. They had been performing a number of gigs under different names, but this was the one that stuck because their performance at the Marquee Club was so successful. Now, their first big break, as it were, was when the Rolling Stones invited them to perform a song at the rock and roll circus film that they were making in late 1968. Very unfortunately for Jethro Tull, though, nobody would see it for almost 20 or 30 years until it got re-released. I think it was in the 1990s. So it kind of languished in the vaults for a while, but it just shows their stature at the time that the Rolling Stones were inviting them to perform. But it was just a harbinger for things to come. They would go on to perform at the Isle of Wight Festival, at Hyde Park, etc. So anyway, enough with the history of the band. Let's get into the music on this great album. The first track is My Sunday Feeling, which is a 12-bar blues written by Ian Anderson. This is the kind of music that Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green were putting out right around the same time. And it might shock some people to hear this and realize that it is, in fact, Jethro Tull, because if you're only familiar with their 70s work, it really doesn't sound a whole lot like this song. But it's a very convincing blues workout. I do enjoy this one a lot. And it definitely has Ian Anderson's quirky stamp all over it, but a very cool album opener. The next track, Someday the Sun Won't Shine on You, is an acoustic blues number also written by Ian Anderson. And again, very similar to the kind of music that Fleetwood Mac were putting out. It does feature harmonica played by Anderson, which just shows he wasn't just a one-dimensional kind of flute player. He could also play a pretty badass harmonica.
my things together, packing up and leaving this place. I don't believe you'll cry, there'll be a smile upon your face. I didn't think how much you hurt me. There's something I laugh about, bringing the good times, baby, and let the bad times out.
Beggar's Farm is co-written by Abrahams and Anderson. It's a song about infidelity, and it's a perfect blend of both of their styles. It has a jazzy, folky, kind of progressive feel to it, which I think works really well.
Taking chances and your reputation's going down. Going out in the night time, the thing you make no sound. But you don't fool me, 'cause I know what you feel. If you ignore the things I see, someday soon's gonna find your way down on Beggar's Farm. Way down on Beggar's Farm.
Move On Alone was written by Mick Abrahams, and it's one of the more interesting songs, even though it's only just barely 2 minutes long. I think it's like 1 minute and 58 seconds long, but it's got some brass in it, which apparently Abrahams did not realize was going to be laid down on the recording until he actually heard it. The engineer, the producer, kind of snuck the horns on there without him knowing it, but he actually kind of liked it after he heard it. But it's got kind of a Chicago, a little more subdued kind of Chicago vibe to it, a little punchiness added with the horns, but I dig this song a lot. Abrahams actually sings the song, and it just goes to show he's not a bad vocalist at all.
So sad now that she's gone. I've been loving that woman too long. There's no place to go, 'cause my friends have all moved. Got nothing but sit in the sun. Got tired of crying. Guess I'll move on alone.
The last track on side one is Serenade to a Cuckoo, which is a cover song by Roland Kirk. He was a multi-instrumentalist, jazz, flute player, and tenor saxophonist. He died very young at the age of 42 from a stroke, but nonetheless, it seems a natural choice for Jethro Tull to cover this song. Shows their jazzy side and just how versatile a band they were. Side 2 opens with Dharma for one, and it's basically just a showcase for Clive Bunker to jump in and go ape shit on the drums. But holy crap, what a fantastic drummer he is. If you need any more evidence that he is one of the greatest drummers of the 60s and 70s. Just listen to this song. It's Breaking Me Up is an Ian Anderson composition that sounds very much like Cream. This sounds like a song straight off of Disraeli Gears or Wheels of Fire, but it's also a very cool blues song. I love when Jethro Tull stretches out and does a very kick-ass Cream impression. Mick Abrahams even does a very convincing Jack Bruce here. And speaking of Cream, Cat Squirrel is an instrumental, a traditional blues number that Cream featured on their first album, Fresh Cream. They do a very energetic version of this song, and I think it's so interesting to hear Jethro Tull do a psychedelic blues workout like this, considering the progressive path that they would take in the future. Song for Jeffrey was the second Jethro Tull single, and the Jeffrey in the title is future Jethro Tull bassist Jeffrey Hammond, who seemed to be adrift at the time. He was friends with Ian Anderson. It's a cool psychedelic blues, probably the song most casual Jethro Tull fans are familiar with of any song on this album. And Ian Anderson showing just how the flute can be a blues instrument. The last track, Round, is a jazzy piano instrumental that was composed by their producer, Terry Ellis. Not sure why this is on here exactly. I guess it forms a nice coda to the rest of the album, but less than a minute long, so not much really of substance here. Okay, so that is my take on Jethro Tull's first album. Let me know what you think of it. Of course, Jethro Tull would go on to bigger and better things, but hopefully you've enjoyed this episode, and we'll look forward to more to come. Thanks for watching, and take care.